Hey, Happy Horror Time listeners. Since we recorded this interview a little earlier this year, I wanted to provide the latest info on Hauntology, the queer horror anthology film that we discuss in this episode, written and directed by Parker Brennon and starring Nancy Loomis, famous for her role as Annie in the original Halloween. Hauntology had its world premiere on June 29th at the Dances with Films Festival in Los Angeles and was just released for streaming in the US and Canada on September 17th, which means you can rent or buy the film now on either Apple TV or Amazon Prime Video. So make sure to check out Hauntology and enjoy this dual interview with writer-director Parker Brennon and Nancy Loomis.
Hello, and welcome to Happy Horror Time Podcast. I'm Tim Murdoch.
And I'm Matt Emmerd. Today's first special guest is the writer-director of a new indie horror anthology that's filled with supernatural tales of witchcraft, possession, and vengeful spirits. It's called Hauntology and boasts an incredibly diverse cast, including some familiar faces in horror. And speaking of familiar faces, our second special guest is making her return to film and horror with Hauntology. She previously starred in films from the late 70s and early 80s like Assault on Precinct 13, The Fog, and she played Annie in my favorite film of all time, 1978's Halloween. We couldn't be more excited to welcome to the podcast Hauntology's writer and director, Parker Brennon, and a true horror legend, Nancy Loomis. Hi.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for coming on the
guys.
show. Hello. So to kick things off, before we even get into any of the films, we'd love to know a little bit about both of your backgrounds. So starting with Parker, what was it like growing up in Ohio, where our lovely Tim is from, and how did you first get interested in filmmaking?
Oh my gosh. I've always been attracted to the spooky side of life. I think Halloween season, being like September through October, it's even since I was just a really little kid, favorite time of year. All the like gateway horror stuff I would watch. If you guys remember, Are You Afraid of the Dark? That TV series. And like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, just like anything even horror adjacent I was in. I feel
growing up in Ohio in the fall?
Yeah, it's beautiful here. And people have asked me like, oh, like, are you going to move to LA since you're in filmmaking? And I just think I'd miss it too much. My whole family's here. We get all the seasons. It's just kind of fabulous. And I love being like more remote from the city. You can probably tell from Hauntology because everything seems to be, it's like 75% rural just because I can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And before Hauntology, you directed a few horror shorts. Can you tell us a little bit about them, and are they available to watch anywhere?
Yeah, everything's on YouTube. So you can go to my website. You can just go to my YouTube channel. I did everything on there is stuff I did after film school. No one needs to see the stuff I did before. I'll say that.
Was it a lot of horror though? I mean, because I saw on your IMDb page a couple of the shorts were horror. Were those pre-film school or post?
Let me think. Everything after film school is horror. I did there is like one thing on YouTube from film school that's just like a kind of a campy story about people who overuse the word like, how they just kind of like this, like that. That bothered me at the time. And of course, I made a movie about it.
I hope they all got murdered.
Yeah. But I mean, even like way back when I first like started making stuff with webcams, like real low budget, that was all like murder mysteries. So the horror adjacent thing, it's always been in my life.
Nice. Now, Nancy, where are you from originally? And can you just take us through how you first got involved in acting?
I was born in Virginia, in Falls Church, Virginia. And my earliest memories of acting were really about dancing. I got interested in my parents took me to the Ice Capades. And I just thought that was so dreamy. I think I saw Swan Lake on ice or something. And I just immediately wanted to start dancing. So I was in ballet lessons at a pretty young age, and then I was going to Sunday school, and they were doing a production of I don't know, some religious story with some kind of moral moral meaning that was appropriate for children, and I got the role because I think I had the biggest voice, and I continued to act all the way through from K through 12 because I had the biggest voice, and I could memorize lines really quickly, and so I got a lot of kudos for that, and it was a lot of fun. It was really fun, and I didn't realize I had all this experience, but eventually I went to college and majored in theater, and it just sort of kept going from there. And I branched out into costume design and set decorating and, all the jobs behind the camera and behind backstage. And those jobs eventually became much more interesting to me than acting.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And growing up, were either of you fans of horror films? And was there one film in particular that majorly had an impact on you?
For me, yes. I don't know about you, Nancy. I know you're not the biggest horror watcher.
No, my parents made a terrible mistake when I was about 4 years old or 5. They took me to a movie, and I don't think they knew it was going to be so scary. And I ran screaming from the theater, and my dad had to run after me and then sit with me in the lobby till it was over, because it was I remember somebody getting sucked down in the mud, and I you may know this movie, but I just couldn't believe that this guy was not going to escape this what do you call those?
Like quicksand?
Quicksand, yeah.
Wait, Tim, do we know this movie?
I mean,
You might. It's
I'm
a pretty
thinking-
famous movie from the 1950s.
Oh, God.
And I can't remember the name of it, but from that moment on, it's like, I'm not going to see anything scary. And so really, until I made Halloween, or I think I just avoided any kind of horror. So all those great movies that Vincent Price made, Fall of the House of Usher, I missed all of those. I didn't see The Black Cat until I was like 42 or something.
Yeah, have you seen The Exorcist? I have a feeling no.
I did
Oh.
see The Exorcist because I went on opening day to see The Exorcist because I had just moved back to LA and my friends really wanted to go see it. They were big movie buffs. And I was terrified, but I was grown up enough and I was intrigued enough by the story to me, it was sort of, I don't know, I tested my mettle there and I survived.
And Parker,
but I've only seen it once.
I can imagine. I mean, once is enough for a lot of people, I'll say. Parker, what is the movie or horror movie that had the biggest impact on you?
Okay, I know this is an audio medium. I'm going to hold up a Blu-ray. So I have my Carnival of Souls from 1962 Blu-ray. This was the film that kicked off me just being like a more casual horror fan to looking for the deep cuts. And it's the movie that to this day inspires me because it's like Halloween. It's very independently made. And I can see kind of the rough around the edges quality in the film, but that doesn't take away any of its magic. It just has this unforgettable atmosphere, and the sound design, the music, and the performance from Candace Hilligoss. It's just completely changed my life.
That is a really unique answer because we do these interviews all the time, and a lot of people we ask this question to, and it's like The Exorcist or something like Jaws or Psycho, which are all incredible movies, but like it's nice to hear something more specific like that, especially because there's such a diverse amount of horror that exists today. So before we dive into Hauntology, I do have to ask you, Nancy, just a few questions about working on John Carpenter's Halloween, because like I said in the intro, this film, it's had such a major influence on the entire horror genre, but on me personally, ever since I saw it for the first time at age 11, your performance as Laurie Strode's best friend, Annie, it's just so memorable and important to the film. And I wanted to ask, you had previously worked with John Carpenter on Assault on Precinct 13 2 years before Halloween. So did you audition for Halloween, or did John select you for it? And why do you think you were chosen for like the more sarcastic Annie versus the bubbly Linda or the reserved Laurie?
Well, I didn't audition for any of those parts, because I was friends with John, and he was very fond of just hiring all the people that he knew. He it saved him time, it saved him money, it saved him, he didn't have to think about it. It was the same. It's just when he wrote his scripts, he just used the characters' names who were all friends of his, So it was just easier for him, I think. And I was kind of a known quantity. And I think he appreciated my sarcasm more than most people. And so he just developed it into a character. And so it was fun. And I think when they were, when they were writing this movie about these three babysitters, they were trying to distinguish one character from another, and set the character of Laurie up to be the protagonist and the heroine. And she needed foils. She needed people to play against. And so having a character like me who was, really just interested in what was going on in the moment and wanting to have fun and hang out with her boyfriend, and who cares about these kids, they'll be fine, that someone who is sort of irresponsible on a lot of different levels but could still be friends with somebody like Laurie, is sort of what the writers were after. And so I think that's how that happened.
No, that makes sense.
Or I don't know, Deborah Hill could have based it on people she went to high school with, for all I know.
Yeah, and I was going to say that the late, extremely talented Deborah Hill co-wrote the script with John, and she was especially instrumental. I've read in writing the girls' dialogue. But when we talked with PJ Souls, she also mentioned that some of her dialogue was improv. So I have to ask, Nancy, and I know this is very specific, so if you don't remember, no biggie, but do you remember if the "Oh, Paul" song that you sing in your death scene, was that in the script or was that improv?
No, we made that up just before we shot it. The whole crew was standing around making up lyrics to that song.
I mean, it's great.
And for some reason, I just started singing that melody. I don't know what we just had to do it. So I just started doing it, and the crew was, figuring out lines and throwing lines. It was all done very quickly, and it was a ton of fun.
It seems like fun, and it's the rhyming is on par for it.
And what was it like working with the young Kyle Richards? And have you ever seen her on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills?
No, I didn't even know she was on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I barely remember working with Kyle Richards. We just had one or two scenes together, and I'm sure that those scenes that we shot in the house were just a lot of fun. There was just, but we were all very busy, just being very professional. Let's get through this. John was, he was really like somebody who was just going to do one or two takes, and that was it. We're going to move on. And so I can't say that I have a really, deep memory of having worked with her, but yeah, good for her. Yeah. She's a big star now, huh?
Yeah. I mean, on reality TV. Overall, how did being in Halloween impact your life and career back then? And how does it still impact you today?
Well, today it's much more important than it was then. I made a couple of films after Halloween, and then my whole life just sort of went down a different path, away from the movie and television business. And I completely forgot about Halloween until, like, I don't know, the early aughts. When did horror conventions become a thing?
Probably the early aughts.
Yeah, right? I want to say like 2003, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, one day out of the blue, I got a phone call from someone who wanted to do an interview about Halloween. And I thought, what? Who are you? I don't remember anything about Halloween. It's been like 20 years or something. And then a friend of mine called and who's in the movie business and had made some horror films. And she called and said, "Hey, do you know about these conventions that are going on in and starting to happen? They're like Comic-Con. Do you know what?" And I didn't even know what Comic-Con was. And so she got me connected with her agent, and he convinced me that going to these conventions was a good idea and it would be a ton of fun. And I was terrified. I don't want to meet all these strangers. Who are these people? It's like, just like, because I was leading a completely different life. You have to understand. I was so far away from this whole thing that had, sort of sprung up and emerged thanks to the internet and thanks to all these new ways of people who were fans to connect with each other. And also at the same time, having the accessibility to horror movies that you could watch like 1,000 times over and over and over again. You could stop every frame. You could really parse the whole thing to like a very fine line. And I didn't even have a TV, I was just really on a different path at the time. So I went to my first horror convention and I survived.
And did you enjoy yourself? Was it fun as people said it would be?
I did enjoy myself. That was the really wonderful thing, that I met all these great people, who seemed like, regular, ordinary people who just happened to like horror movies. But because I didn't like horror movies, I couldn't understand why people would like them. I have other obsessions, I have other things that I'm crazy about. So I could relate to them on that level. Like, okay, yeah. I'm into this. They're into that. Fine. They're normal, really friendly, really likable people. And I realized that, I could talk to them. I could be myself with them and I could, make a lot of money going to these conventions. Yeah. And that was nice. That was really, really a boon. So I kept on doing it. Oh. And in the course of doing that, I've come to appreciate the horror genre in ways that I never did before.
Yay.
And it's grown. I mean, I still have trouble watching the movies, but after years of hearing people talk on a pretty sophisticated level about why it works for them and how they appreciate it, I've really come to recognize that I was part of a very special thing that happened.
You were, yeah.
And people appreciate that, and so I do too.
And Parker, before working with Nancy, what were your thoughts on the original Halloween?
Oh my gosh. It's one of those most essential horror films, right? It's horror 101. So we've all seen it. I've always loved the music. I've always loved the performances. And I remember going to an anniversary screening, like maybe it was 2018. And I walked out of the theater and just thought 5 out of 5. Like, there's a reason this movie is a classic. I have the DVD with me. It's been in my collection as long as I can remember.
Yeah, Nancy, last question on Halloween, and it's a big one. Why do you think this film specifically has resonated with horror fans for almost 46 years now, and that people like me are so incredibly fond of it?
Well, I guess I should ask you to answer that question, but I think it's the filmmaking. I think it's the Panavision camera. And the shot making, and the music, and the way it's edited. There's so much care and attention to detail with no money. So there's. I mean, we had some money. We had more money to make that film than Assault on Precinct 13. We had twice as much money, but it still wasn't a whole lot of money. We were just a group of people, really, young kids who just wanted to make a movie and wanted it to be as good as possible and wanted it to be scary. And I think the reason why it works is that it is so simple. The character, those 3 babysitters are just ordinary girls from the San Fernando Valley, and they're just having their life. And out of nowhere comes this, sort of undefined evil, right? Just undefined. And though they try to define it, and they never succeed,
Yeah.
And that's the best answer I can give, that technically it's really great. And that counts for a lot. Then the music is really great.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with all of what you said. That what I usually say when people say, why is this film so important to you? Why has it had such an impact on you? To me, it's the simplicity of it. It's just a simple story of people being stalked by someone. You have no idea why, what's going on. They're showing up everywhere they go, watching them, which is the scariest feeling, following them, being there in the shadows. Everyone's afraid of what's in the shadows waiting for them. And it's just a simple story with incredibly terrifying music and great performances. So
yeah.
I would agree with what you said. Last question in this early section, Nancy. 2 years later, you starred in another John Carpenter horror classic, The Fog, and shared most of your scenes with the great Janet Leigh. Can you tell us just a little bit about that experience?
Well, that was really the most fun for me, working with Janet Leigh, because I was never comfortable in front of the camera, as Parker will tell you. I'm still uncomfortable in front of a camera. And Janet Leigh was someone who could really help me relax. And she taught me so much, and she was so much fun to be around. And I just wasn't allowed to be in awe of her, I just wasn't. She just wouldn't allow it. And she made everyone at home in her space. And so I learned an incredible amount from her and just loved working with her.
That's great. Well, thank you for indulging in me with those questions
Sure.
about your early career. Moving on to Hauntology. Now, I know a lot of people were involved in the making of this movie, and I saw there was even a Kickstarter page for it. So, Parker, can you kind of take us through how the movie came to be, like where you got the idea for the story and what made you choose the anthology format?
Yeah. And oh my gosh, I need to be careful because I could talk about this for like 3 hours. So the short version is in 2019, I wanted to make my first feature. And I thought if I did an anthology, I could film it in segments and it would be more financially feasible. The scheduling would, like, I could have time to prepare the schedules for each, and we could do the seasonal thing, which is something I'm really proud of, that it feels like we're moving through a year of time going through the movie. So I wrote that in 2019. The pandemic happened when I was close to starting to make it on my own, and I obviously put it off. And this project grew from like a $30,000 budget to a $600,000 budget.
Wow. On your first feature, I was thinking, wow, that's great.
And had you always wanted to film in Ohio? I mean, I love Ohio. I go there every Christmas.
I would make all of my movies here. And there's actually a big concentration of horror fans in Ohio. Did you know that, Tim?
I mean,
I was going to say, I didn't know that, Tim.
I left in 1999, but I mean, I have my friends that still like horror movies.
Yeah, like I saw some map that was showing, those like haunted attractions where you can walk through and people jump out and scare you. Apparently, Ohio has more of those than any other state in the country.
Oh my God, I'm going to Ohio in October.
Yeah, it's like it's like a secret mecca for people who love horror, I guess.
That's crazy. I mean, now, Nancy, this was your first feature film since starring in 1982's Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. So how did you first get involved with this project? And what was it about Hauntology that inspired you to return to acting?
Well, it was through my agent, Chris, because he had some other clients who had already filmed their sequences. Yeah. Isn't that right, Parker?
Yeah, Aubrey Bowen and Naomi Grossman both work with Chris Rowe.
So he read the script and saw there was this part for this old lady, I think. Or did he mention it to you? I'm not quite. Did he ask you? But he came back to me at some point and said, "Hey, there's this interesting show that's being shot right now, and there might be a part for you in it if you're interested. And I wasn't interested. It was like, Chris, come on, I'm too old. But he gave me the script, and I really immediately responded to the script because I really appreciated the LGBTQIA2S plus community, and the celebration of that community, and so the thematic concern really struck me as being important and also very interesting at the same time. So that's when I agreed to do it.
And Parker, how did you feel after Nancy agreed to appear in your first feature film?
Oh my God. Well, so I'll tell my kind of version of how it happened.
Yeah. Does it go with anything to do with mine? I don't know.
Yeah. Because ostensibly, Nancy had retired from acting, so she wasn't on my radar at all, unfortunately. And I don't know if you probably can't see way back there. I have a signed autograph from Meg Foster, who also works with Chris Rowe.
Right.
I'm a fan of hers. So I asked Chris if Meg might want to do the Josephine Cashel role. And he said, well, Meg's having some health problems right now, so I don't think that's going to work. What about Nancy Loomis? And like me and my producers all turned to each other like, wait, no, wait, what? And of course, very quickly, we're like, yeah, like let's see what she thinks. And I heard Nancy has a trans son, so that was kind of cool because we have an important trans story in Hauntology. Right. And yeah, so we heard back that the script was good enough for Nancy, and we all celebrated it.
That's so cool.
Wow, Meg would have been great in that role, though. She has those eyes.
Yes, yeah. Oh my God. Yes. Know? Into your soul, yeah. But then amazing. You wouldn't have been here today, Nancy.
Well, I wouldn't have.
We wouldn't have gotten to talk to you. So Parker, the through line across Hauntology is the story of Venus, a non-binary teen whose older sister, Jasmine, stops them from running away by taking them around town and sharing supernatural tales about other townspeople who were seen as different. And the first vignette in particular features a trans woman played by Zoe Luna from the Craft legacy who casts a spell to transform into her ideal self. But the dark spirit she awakens won't leave her alone after kind of feeding off the negative energy that she shed during this transformation. Now, I assume there's a ton of meaning behind this story. I was hoping you could explain some of the thinking that went into that vignette in particular.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So that story was a bold one for me because it was a story that's very personal, and I never thought I would actually film it. That's like a fantasy I used to have, is what if I could just like go out in the woods and become a beautiful woman by making a deal with some dark entity. I used to think about that all the time, strangely enough. And when I was making Hauntology, I remember hearing someone say that like the most personal stories are usually the most interesting and connect with people the best. So I thought, all right, I'll write this strange tale and then I'll probably take it out later. But then as I had people read the script and like all these close people in my life were giving feedback, that one always stood out. They're like, no, you have to keep that one in. So, yeah, and I think if I were to just explain what it means to me simply, I'm a non-binary person, but I identify a lot with women and I enjoy feeling feminine and glamorous. And I wanted to make a story where this trans person gets what she wants, but it doesn't solve all of her problems. Like she becomes this beautiful goddess or however you want to view her. But, life isn't just easy after that, but at the end she still gets to stay who she really is. I remember someone was giving feedback and said, well, shouldn't she like turn back into some like masculine looking person at the end? And I said, no way. Like I would never tell this story if Julian was going to get punished.
Yeah, no, it's so cool to hear how personal that is. That's why I specifically wanted to ask about that vignette, because I could tell there was a lot of meaning behind that one.
And Nancy,
Yeah.
you played Mrs. Cashel in the fourth story, the owner of a Victorian mansion that's known for being haunted. What were your thoughts on this character when you first read the script?
Well, I thought it was a character I could play for sure. And I could play it without too much trouble. I think I had, I don't know, 12 lines or something. I didn't have a whole lot of lines. So I also was relieved because I thought I could manage it. And I liked the segment a lot. And I really liked the character that Lindsay played. Like, what was Lindsay's name?
Madeline Ishii.
Madeline.
Oh, Ishii. Miss
Yeah.
Ishii. Yes.
Yeah. And I also liked the housekeeper.
Yes.
Mrs. What's her name?
Boxell.
Boxell,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. Yeah, I thought, that was kind of a cool little dynamic going there. No.
Oh, I was just going to say, and since it had been some time since your last film, how did it feel to be back in front of the camera? Was it familiar, or did it feel completely different from when you were acting in the 70s and 80s?
Well, it was very nerve-wracking. It was very different. I noticed that right off the bat because filmmaking has just shifted in technically, and it was just, it's always amazing when you can see what you shot right away and make decisions about it. And that was not going on when I was shooting back in the day.
So a little different from working with John Carpenter, then, just a little bit.
Yeah. It has its advantages and disadvantages, I think, because John had a way, and, the people on the crew had a way of sensing, oh, we might need another take, and sensing, no, I think we got it. And he was rarely wrong. He rarely had to go back and reshoot. And that way he could just move ahead. He had a certain kind of sense of what he wanted out of the scene. He was always really well prepared. And he had a certain sense of what he was looking at while it was happening in real time. And I don't know how you cultivate that, or if it's just something that you have, What do you think, Parker?
Well, I guess one thing I just keep thinking about is this, this idea that you don't know exactly how it looks, but you just have to sense that it's good. But for me, it's like, there are so many minute details I adjust based on the frame that I'm looking at on the monitor, and like the camera placement's everything. You can move it like an inch and like completely different composition, like way better looking. I value that kind of stuff a lot. And I have worked with film before back in school, and it always amazes me when it turns out well, but it's so stressful. Like if your film, if it's underexposed, overexposed, if something goes wrong processing the film, I love that all those elements are gone. One thing that I value about film, though, is, and I'm going to tell a little story about Nancy, is when you're using film, it's expensive and you need to be efficient. So with digital, we kind of take our time. Like most of the actors I call action or whatever, and they kind of take a moment to like get into it. Nancy just like goes like action. She's like saying the line, and I interpreted that as, you're being conscientious of the like film, but in our case, digital space. Like you don't want to waste any time.
People
right?
are standing around. People are getting paid. You've got to go.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I'm thinking about like, oh, are we going to go into golden time here? I was just so trained. That's the way I was trained, right?
Exactly. And I noticed that, but it was fun.
That's fun that you noticed that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing we noticed, Nancy, we have to talk about that fabulous white hat that you get to wear as Mrs. Cashel. Did you get to keep that after filming?
No, I think Parker has that.
I do. I have all of Nancy's stuff.
But Parker, I really wish you'd made me wear that hat. I wasn't so sure about that hat in the beginning, but I really loved the way it looked.
Oh, we loved it.
I wish that I'd worn it all the time.
I loved it too.
Parker, that hat. Yes.
And
so
Nancy,
great.
I need to give more credit to Nancy. She had so many good ideas. So the glasses that she wears when she's doing the cross stitch, when we first meet her, that was completely her idea. And I love that little moment when she takes them off And the way that the hat is kind of folded in the front was also Nancy's idea. She was thinking just like little details about how to style the character beyond what we had in mind. And I really appreciated that.
That's so
Well,
cool.
it was fun.
Parker, were we to assume that Mrs. Casual may have been in a romantic relationship with her longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Boxell, or am I way off on that?
Can I just like hug you virtually for picking up? Because there's like nothing in the script that is explicitly saying that, but I did write, I don't know if Nancy remembers, I sent a little backstory that there may be some like romantic tension between Francine and Josephine. For sure. Every character in Hauntology is somewhere on the spectrum of queerness. And even our villain, William Cashel, who's the ghost, in his backstory, I had this idea that he has queer feelings, and that's why he's so like violently hateful, because that's like
So
the
scary.
worst thing he can imagine.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
scary.
So, yeah, we definitely picked up on a little of that and wondered about that. But something that, like you were saying, Parker, was very nice to see is that you feature such a diverse group of LGBTQ plus characters within this anthology, as well as, you know, multiple queer actors in various roles. So my question is that how did you go about writing these characters? I mean, other than in the first vignette, were others based on people you know, or what was the thinking behind how you approached LGBTQ plus representation in the film?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's a big question.
I know. I was conscientious of the diversity. I was thinking, like, how fun would it be if I could, like, secretly assign a label, like, this person's pan, this person's bi, this person's a lesbian, but I don't, you know, people kind of, I'm noticing more and more people don't like labels nowadays. It feels like the younger generation just wants to be more like fluid. Like we love who we love. We don't
are
need
who
to,
you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried not to say things explicitly in the script, like this person's gay or a lesbian too. Like even when Jasmine describes the Mabel Bishop character, she's like, you know, she preferred ladies to men. So I like just keeping it a little bit open. I think that might hopefully help the queer representation age well.
Yeah.
And this is a question for both of you. Have you ever had any real life experiences with ghosts or anything supernatural?
I'm dying to hear if you have, Nancy.
I have. I have had interesting dreams where historic figures have appeared to me in my dreams.
Wow.
And when back in the 70s and 80s, and I was hanging out in Kentucky quite a bit on this farm down in Kentucky. I may have told you about it, Parker. I don't know. I'm sure I talked to somebody on the crew about it. But there's this farm down there that my ex-husband and I had for a while. And we thought that there's this old farmhouse there. And we sensed that very often there would be a ghost. There was a ghost somehow in this house, especially when you sort of went up into the attic, and I could sense something moving around me. But the coolest thing happened one day when I was out in the field behind the house, and I was walking up toward the house, and I don't know what it was, but suddenly I sort of veered off the path for no reason at all. I just veered off the path, and then I just decided to sit down in this sort of, you know, area where there was a lot of spring flowers. But anyway, I looked down and I started to look, and there was a 4-leaf clover there. And then I looked some more, and within a few minutes I had picked, I don't know how many 4-leaf clovers. And I started laughing, and I just thought, you know, I think that ghost was wanting me to notice this. You know, I attributed it to the spirit of this place. And this place down in Kentucky is so magical. You know, there's and Ohio is the same way. There is a sense of spirit there that if you're alive to it, it's really quite beautiful in a way. But there's also a tinge of melancholia, and I'm not sure what that is. But it was new to me when I went there, and I hadn't experienced things like that.
Wow.
But I came to appreciate it.
This feels like it could be the fifth story in Hauntology, Parker.
No,
like,
yeah.
like especially the melancholy. I'm waiting. You could create a new story based off of that. How about, have you experienced anything with ghosts or supernatural?
I've had like a few minor experiences. I did a short film called Haunt Me that was at a haunted bed and breakfast. And I remember
I love the title.
It was about a young woman who really wants to see a ghost. As I wanted to make something that's like the opposite of most horror movies where people are trying to get away. I wanted to make a character who was like, no, please, like, I want this to happen. Yeah. So I remember the owner of that house said that she had a room that was a portal and that the spirits would like come through that one room, and I had our sound guy put all his equipment in there, and she said his batteries are all gonna die. But I can't remember if that actually happened.
Oh, I was gonna say, did they?
I really don't remember. We were fine, obviously. The movie got made, but I think the moment I had that what felt pretty supernatural was when I went to the Mansfield Reformatory. I don't know if you've been there. It's a really stunning.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Location. Yeah. It's a prison. So it's got a lot of heavy energy, but I was just walking through there with a friend, and I remember looking up in this kind of tower thing, and I wanted to take a photo, and I saw with my eye what looked like something flying like overhead. It looked like a bird or like a physical being. And I took a photo at the same time. And in the photo, there's just like this weird like streak of like white light. But I know I saw something more physical than that. So that just felt very strange. And I'm not sure how to explain it.
Yeah.
I grew up in Hilliard, so mine would be a haunting in Hilliard.
A haunted, get extra H's.
Nice.
A haunting in Hilliard. So, all four stories within the anthology are so unique, but I have to say, personally, I really enjoyed some of the slasher aspects of the third one and how the possessed killer would, sprinkle little paint droplets on each victim. Now, obviously, I understood why the deceased artist May Fellner hated the gallery owners who forged her paintings. But one thing I didn't understand, wanted to ask you about, was why she was so angry with the woman, Christina. So can you tell us, what was that vendetta about? Like, was it because Christina left May on her deathbed? That was kind of an inkling of what I thought, but wasn't sure.
Yeah, well, I wanted that little moment to be representative of more things that we're not seeing on screen, which would be this idea that May really truly loved Christina, and Christina just for whatever reason, like, maybe it was their age difference or just something felt wrong to her. And in that moment when May needed her most because she was dying, Christina just had to leave. And I remember telling Samantha Robinson, who does a beautiful performance as Christina, that when she leaves, she doesn't understand that this is the last moment she has. Like, she thinks she can come back in 3 hours and apologize or talk more, but May dies. And that's just like a really heavy feeling.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then one other plot question for you. At the very end, when Venus and Jazz are banishing the spirit of the man in the hat, where did all of that blood come from that was kind of sprayed on their faces, or what did that represent?
Yeah, I wanted to do, I am a fan of Nightmare Logic. Like, if you're a fan of like Dario Argento or some of those, like, I knew that the blood was going to throw people off, but to me, it's like that blood is representative of all the people he killed. And when Mabel and May are dragging him away, and he can't really stop the banishing from happening. It's like his power, which I'm representing by this blood that's flying out from his arms and hands. It's like it's just being stripped away from him. And I don't know. To me, it made the finale a lot more impactful. I think if they had just dragged him away without the blood, it might have felt a little anticlimactic for me.
Yeah,
No,
in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, it's like an explosion, like it's like Jaws.
Yeah, like they're ripping
Like
him
Jaws.
apart. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, however and I am totally open to how people interpret the movie. I'm never going to come down and be like, no, that wasn't my intention as the writer, unless it's something like, hateful or.
Yeah.
But like people could interpret it however they please, and I'm just happy that they enjoy the movie.
Yeah, no, it definitely made it very impactful, and I was thinking it added an extra element to it, and of course it's horror, so people love blood, a little bit of blood here and there.
Yeah.
So we have just a few wrap up questions for the two of you. Starting with Nancy. I've read that you've been a sculptor and a professor for many years, but now that you've appeared in Hauntology, could you see yourself acting in more films, hopefully horror?
If Parker directs them.
Oh, Nancy, I love you so much.
Wow, I mean that would be great. What do you think of that, Parker? Do you think?
Yes. I mean, I want to give a compliment to Nancy too, because we haven't had a chance to talk about the movie. I'm guessing you watched it recently.
No, I did. Yeah. No, I'm excited about it, Parker.
And I just have to say that your scenes, like especially that dining room sequence where you're talking to Lindsay, every time I watch, I might just be scrolling through the movie to check the sound design or like whatever I'm doing, I end up watching that whole scene every time. And it's because of you and Lindsay, like the performances. And when we get into that close up on you, like there's nothing that can make me like pause or turn off the movie. I just
really
I love watching you.
Well, thank you. I think Lindsay's terrific, and I think it's nicely edited with the hand, and it's good. It works.
And we really enjoyed the music in that vignette. Yeah. Like it's almost like it's like the music box combined. The best way I can explain it is a music box combined with like the Stranger Things synth type of thing feel. It felt beautiful. Like, and it really adds to this when she's running around at night, and everything. And so, yeah, definitely major compliments on the music throughout, but that vignette specifically.
Oh, I need to talk a little bit about the music because Jonathan Snipes, who did the music, I've worked with him several times. He did music for a few of my shorts, and he's one of my favorite composers ever. I mean, working with him, it's like working with Nancy. I'm just such a fan. And some of the music he did, he pulled from classical operas, and that came from in the script. I wrote that when we meet Nancy's character, there would be the opening aria for the Queen of the Night from Magic Flute, Die Zauberflöte. And Jonathan was like, hey, let's just like do that throughout. So in some of the other segments, he pulled for just like melodies from other operas, but obviously he made it all his own. So in the Castle House story, when Lindsay arrives, it's an interpretation of the overture from Magic Flute. And then we meet Nancy and we get Au titre nicht. And then when Madeline's coming down the stairs with the candle, that's the Glockenspiel melody, if you recognize it from the opera.
Yeah, there's that touch of Baroque really, really helps, because the set is so over the top, it's so Victorian and it's beautiful and it's beautifully lit. That saturated quality that you got, and you really have that throughout the whole movie, I think.
Is that in Victorian Village?
Well, I love that you asked that because we actually filmed that segment in Norwalk, which is closer to Cleveland. But I did throw in Jasmine and Venus walking through Victorian Village to make like a fictional Ohio City in my mind for the world of Hauntology.
And no one was wearing Ohio State Buckeye memorabilia, which is cool.
I know Tim always talks about how everybody in Ohio is always wearing Buckeye stuff.
You can't escape it.
I have to tell you, because I was also thinking about that. Like, haha, I don't even care about football. There's nothing of that in Hauntology. But if you look really closely, when Jasmine and Venus are walking by those Victorian mansions, there's a sticker in the back of someone's car for Ohio State. And I'm like, damn it.
Go Buckeyes!
It got in there.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I live there. I love it. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, my family they watch all those Buckeye football games. I'm just, the only thing I look at when I watch those are the men in the tight pants.
Yes, I know. We've definitely talked about that. It's yeah, but it's like there's tons of queer people that love sports, so I don't want to act like like we don't, but it's a safe bet. Like with Tim and we're like, sports.
I grew up with it for 22 years, so it's ingrained in my skull. But
Right.
Nancy, when you go to horror conventions, I want to know, what is the number one, or what's the most common thing people ask you at horror conventions about?
Yeah, what's the most common question you get?
What was it like to work with fill in the blank? John Carpenter, Jamie Lee Curtis, PJ Souls,
Really?
or Janet Leigh.
Tom Atkins?
They really that's a safe question for people to ask, and they ask it.
Wow.
And they rarely deviate.
I was just gonna say, even I was curious when we met, like, have you seen Jamie recently?
Yeah,
Do you still hang out with John?
Yeah,
when
people
was
just
the last
assume
time?
that it's a very small world that we live in, since and it's been 45 years since we made the movie, and I live, clear across town, and I live on the east side, and I have nothing to do with what goes on the west side. It might as well be, Canada over there.
Yeah.
And although today I'm going over to Santa Monica.
That's so funny, because I mean, I know PJ Souls comes to a lot of conventions also, so I'm sure you see her often.
Oh, yeah,
but
it's great. It's great to catch up with people at these conventions. It's one of the fun things that, fun perks, is that I get to hang out with people that I worked with from time to time.
And do you have the Blu-ray of Halloween 2018?
Yeah.
And,
I mean,
Halloween Kills?
No, it's so funny because I know in the new trilogy, they show Annie in multiple flashbacks, like pictures and scenes. I'm not sure if you've seen them, or if you knew of that.
Well, I knew about it because I had to, approve their use, but I haven't seen those movies, and I probably won't.
Have you did you stay in touch with John Carpenter or Jamie Lee at all after Halloween?
Yeah, but we don't really cross paths. We don't socialize that much anymore.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Just at these, once in a while I see John. John came out for the 45th anniversary of Halloween, because it was, the locale was in, Pasadena.
Yeah.
And it was great to see him.
Yeah, no, that's great to be able to catch up.
He gave me a hard time for accusing the film of being a patriarchal model that needed to be dismantled.
He came up to you specifically to say that?
I had said that. I forget what the context was, but it was in one of those big Q&A things. And somebody had asked me a question about, the women in horror movies. I don't remember, but I wound up talking about, that time and how different it is now. The use of, or just the way characters are written, and the awareness that has, started to seep into filmmaking. It's very slow. It's very tiny, but, Barbie sort of blew the whole, lid off of it. But Barbie actually did introduce the word patriarchy into the psyche of, most Americans who probably never even heard of it until Barbie. It was mentioned in the movie Barbie. So I guess it's in the ether, right? But John somehow heard about this. I don't know, it was from Nick Castle or somebody who was also on that panel. So then he was like giving me a hard time about it. Just because he likes to give me a hard time.
That's funny. So Parker, I know you're probably still completely consumed by this film at the moment, but what do you see yourself doing next? Do you think you'll write and direct another horror film?
So my plan is, I'm just going to focus on my writing for the near future. And what I've heard, I listened to podcasts endlessly, and I've heard interviews with countless directors. And one thing I hear over and over is when you get called into a general meeting, they will ask what you have, but really they want to kind of pitch what they're developing. And I'm very open to that. Because I've been working on this movie since 2019, basically. the idea of interpreting someone else's screenplay and directing that sounds interesting to me right now. But of course, if nothing interesting shows up, maybe I'll just direct another original story.
That's great. So, our usual final question in all of our interviews would be, what is one thing you both can tell us about your experience working on Hauntology that you've never told any other interviewer, publication, or podcaster? But because Parker told me this is your first interview about Hauntology, and we're very honored about that, instead, we're going to ask, is there any little fun fact you both can tell us about working on this film? Or maybe for Nancy, something you've never told an interviewer about your experience working on Halloween, if you don't have a fun fact about Hauntology. But Parker, maybe we start with you. If there's any little fun behind the scenes fact you can tell us about the Hauntology experience.
Oh my gosh. I mean, again, this is a question I could answer for 3 hours. I could just sit here and tell you about everything. I remember when we were texting back and forth before this, I had a kind of a cute story about Nancy. There was a day we were filming and Nancy said, "Hey, there's a yoga class in town that I'd like to go to. Do you think we'll finish my scene before this yoga class?" And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to make sure she gets to do that. So we were super efficient. Everything went well. She goes to the yoga class and were you the only person there?
There was one other woman there.
Oh, okay.
Woman.
I love this idea of like having a yoga class and just like Nancy Loomis walks in and like and one other person.
Wait, who the other person taught the class? I take it, or
no? There was a teacher, and then there was one other person who was a regular.
I would have felt like so fancy because I was like, "Ooh, I have my own private session."
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
And that's so respectful, Parker, that you worked that into like the day and the schedule.
I appreciated it. I really appreciated it because it helped me to relax, But I didn't mean to put any pressure on you to do that.
No.
But
I think the schedule was like already. The problem would have been if we just took longer than I expected, which we didn't. So
yeah, no. I was so impressed with the crew. I thought you had a great crew.
I know. I would
Really
work with
amazing.
any of them again.
I'm coming back to Ohio.
Yeah, maybe we'll make a trip to Ohio if we can work with you on a new film.
And get
Parker, if we can work with you on a new film, we will make a trip to Hauntology. I mean Hauntology. We will make a trip to Ohio to work on something just like Hauntology.
Ohio is haunted.
Haunting in Hilliard.
If you guys really do come to town anytime, I'd love to just grab lunch, hang out. It's always fun to catch up.
Oh my God, are you kidding? Yeah.
How's your family, Parker? That was the fun thing about Hauntology is that Parker's family was all around hanging.
They were.
It was great.
I love little fun. I love this last question because we get little fun stories like that you wouldn't think to tell like in a normal interview, but are still like fun memories,
Can I tell one more too?
Of course, please.
Oh my gosh. So I loved Nancy so much that I was like, "Hey, can I just drive you back to the set?" Like when we would have lunch and stuff. And Nancy was like, "Yeah, sure." So I got to like drive around this small town and talk about Halloween a little bit and the fog. I mean, it was just so fun.
That's great.
I had fun doing that.
And then Nancy, any fun behind the scenes stories from working on Hauntology or anything after 46 years you've never told about your experience working on Halloween?
I have had to overtax my memory to try to remember what happened 45 years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To something that I hadn't really paid attention to. It was there. Yeah, I did it a long time ago. But being around other people who do have memories and their stories has helped me sort of remember that time in a way that I otherwise would not have. I don't know. I remember just sitting around in that house where we were shooting, that big Victorian house, which was the set. It was also where some people were staying. Some people on the crew were staying, including me. And I had a lot of fun rearranging the furniture in my little apartment, which was in the guest house in the back, right? Do you remember that? And I spent a lot of time rearranging the furniture. I think just because it helped keep me calm.
Yeah, that place was cute. And I remember the first night you got there, we got you Chipotle.
Yeah.
I love that. You're like, see, it's that kind of film. It's like the down
Well,
home.
I knew it was
like,
going to be that kind of film.
Comfortable. Comfort food. We love Chipotle.
It felt, I felt very cared for. I really did. And I could tell right away that everybody on the crew was going to be superb. So that gave me a lot of confidence.
I mean, Ohio people are the best.
Says the Ohioan. Yeah.
My sister lives there and she's pretty cool. So,
well, look, Parker and Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time today to be on our show, for talking about things from 45 years ago to the last couple years. Parker, we really enjoyed the film. It's such an important film, and we're just really happy that you're putting something like this out there and that you shared it with us. We're happy to help promote it.
So I love your show, guys, and the reason I discovered it is because of Sam Pancake. I listened to his show, Sam Pancake Presents the Monday Afternoon Movie, and Tim was a guest.
Oh, so that's how you found out about Happy Horror Time?
It is.
I'm such a fan. Children.
Yes, I've listened to all the Stepford episodes. So Sam, if you're listening, have me on your show. And the reason I found Sam's podcast is because of Roz Hernandez, who has my favorite podcast ever, Ghosted by Roz. If you guys listening want to hear more horror podcasts, there you go.
Is it true that my friend Lynn Griffin was on your show?
Yeah. Yes, Lynn Griffin was on the show last year. We talked to her all about Black Christmas and curtains, and then she's going to be in a new fan film sequel to Black Christmas after 50 years.
And she was also in Eli Roth's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
She's one of the best actresses I know. And she's a delightful person. I love Lynn Griffin. So I think that's really, I think, the reason why I agreed to come on this podcast is because Lynn Griffin did it. So,
thank you.
She's amazing. She's amazing, Parker. You should know about her if you don't. She's really cool. And so is her husband.
Like,
Sean.
I love the episode you guys did with Lynn. That was so fun to listen. I could listen to that one again, all over again.
She was such a sweetheart. She sent us afterwards multiple autographed pictures from the different films, from Black Christmas, from Curtains.
Oh.
Like, she was just like the sweetest. And we've been so grateful to do the show, to get to speak with people, like Nancy, who we've been watching forever, like Parker, who is like bringing a whole new type of filmmaking into the world. Like, it just means so much to us to be able to speak with people like you. So thank you.
Hello, Ohioan.
Yeah. It's a pleasure. This movie's so magical. I mean, so many things. You hear about a lot of horror stories on movies, and I feel like this movie was almost the opposite. It felt like things just kept going right, and it was really special.
That's a good sign. That means you should continue doing this, and you definitely should. So we can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was a pleasure to meet you, and Parker, it was great to see you again.
Yeah, we'll see each other at our LA screening later this year, I hope.
Okay. Well, we can't wait. Well, we hope to stay in touch, and take care. Thank you for everything.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Happy Horror Time.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please sign up to be a patron at www.patreon.com/happyhorrortime. As a patron, you get access to all our bonus content, which now includes 2 new bonus episodes every month, a monthly after show mini episode, access to our Discord community so you can chat with us directly, and the chance to review a film with us in one of our bonus episodes.
Patrons also get all our regular episodes ad-free and a day early, our monthly newsletter, the chance to vote in polls, and autographed Happy Horror Time stickers.
I'm Matt Emmert.
And I'm Tim Murdoch.
And we hope you have a happy horror time.